we all appreciate that music and appreciate especially Bob's testimony. I really enjoyed this month of January with mild weather, but I would have appreciated a big snowfall last night. a real blizzard, that would maybe Kevin and I, about 25 people here, and maybe we could let Kevin sing then. Somebody told me this morning, said I didn't look very nervous. I said, boy, it looks sure deceitful, I tell you. You can't tell how someone looks. You can see how my knees are shaking under my pants. I might be the first person that's ever been accused of dancing in the pulpit. So, but when Kevin recently came to my office and told me that he had a couple of questions, I should have been suspicious, especially since the first question wasn't really a difficult one for me to reply to. The second question was, and I'm sure you've already guessed, will you preach the sermon on Baptist Men's Day? I asked him to give me a couple of days to think about it. It was on a Friday, and I told him, I'll let you know on Sunday. And over that weekend, I thought of 100 reasons why I shouldn't do this or couldn't do it. But none of them was really a good enough reason. I remember the outstanding and inspiring messages that have been presented the last 3 years by Sam Simpson, Barry Benningfield, and Richard Buckler. What an excellent precedent they have established and maintained for Baptist Men's Day messages. All three of these Christian gentlemen happened to be in the same Sunday school class, a class that I just happened to attempt with God's help to teach. I also recall how well Jay Arn on Youth Sunday and Peggy Birmingham on Ladies' Day, the Baptist Women's Day, I should say, performed in this same responsibility. And I also reflected back to the time when my son Collins was in high school, and he too stood where I now stand, accepted the challenge and made all of us very proud when he delivered a sermon on self-discipline. So how could I say no? I grew up in this church and have been a member for almost 50 years. Long time. I remember as a small boy coming with my grandmother and grandfather and sitting back over here on the right-hand side, the left as you look for the pulpit. I not only remember the pastors, Dr. Porter, Dr. Slater, and Brother Colvin, who served this church during those times, but I also remember the faithful servants as I was able as a young boy and then as a young man to observe. Who could forget Mr. W.B. Hall, Mr. Clarence Harmon, my Uncle Henry Collins, Mr. Dennis Spraggins, Mr. Jennings Crowdis, and many, many more that I don't have the time to mention all the names. And I'm sure there are many that you can remember. What about the Christian ladies who also had the same dedication to service and same positive witness for all of us to observe? Women like my grandmother, Ms. Luther Collins, whose Christian example, her unshakable faith and humility I shall always remember and cherish. Mrs. Horace Johnson, and some of you may not remember this, she taught for many years the women's Bible class right back here in the room, back where some are sitting this morning, for many years, a class that my grandmother also taught for many years. Miss Winnie Kokenar, who was not only an elementary school teacher we all loved and respected, but also a dedicated and a faithful worker in the youth departments of Sunday school and training union. My Aunt Winnie Johnson, who played the organ and directed the choir for so many years. I can still see Aunt Winnie with those big hats on, playing with one hand and directing with the other. There is one characteristic which is most noticeable in the witness of these faithful pastors and lay people who have helped establish and maintain the ministry of this church. Each has drawn attention, not to themselves, but rather directed the attention toward the God that they joyfully serve. Surely this has made each of us realize that this has always been truly God's house. When someone would ask me, how does it feel to stand where I stand today in this God's house? I must borrow a word from the young people's terminology. It is an awesome experience. When I tried to think of a subject to talk on, I remember a story that I've shared with many of you First time I was called to give a devotional, stand up and say something in public, I called my spiritual advisor that day. I'll always remember, my grandmother. And I asked her, I said, what should I talk about? She said, well, talk about something that you need. Perhaps someone else may need the same thing. And I'm not qualified to preach to you this morning, but I can talk to myself. And I invite you then to listen in as I do so. During the recent World Series, I watched, as I'm sure many of you did, Jack Morris, the 36-year-old pitcher of the Minnesota Twins. He battled the younger and the talented players of the Atlanta Braves. It was the seventh and deciding game, the one that would decide who would be the World Series champion. He was a fierce competitor who wouldn't give an inch, a real workhorse on the pitcher's mound who not only survived the battle, but he won. And in so doing, he became the most valuable player of the world champion Minnesota Twins. I found myself pulling for him. Didn't some of you? Then, when the ink on his World Series check was not even dry, I learned that he had declared himself a free agent. Even though he was already making over $3 million a year playing baseball, plus a healthy bonus check as World Series champ, he wanted more, and he got it. Over $4 million a year to pitch for the Toronto Blue Jays. This in spite of the fact that he had said many times how wonderful it was to be back in his home, Minnesota, pitching. I guess it didn't mean it wasn't wonderful enough. I asked the question, when is enough enough? Another baseball player who had a .260 batting average, drove in 37 runs, and hit 6 home runs in 1991. And for those of you who don't keep up with baseball, those are very ordinary statistics, really less than ordinary. Had a $650,000 salary. His salary for the coming year will be $1,200,000. I read something where the average salary for a baseball player is $800,000 a year. And I ask you again, when is enough enough? Boxers are guaranteed $25 million for title fights. Some even get $8 to $10 million and lose the fight. So when is enough enough? What about the cost of politics in our own state? Some estimates put the cost of this recent governor's race as the fourth most costly in the United States, $19 to $20 million, for a job that pays, I believe, somewhere in the neighborhood of $75,000 to $80,000 a year. This in a state whose population and average income of its citizens is less than average when compared with all the states. When is enough enough? What about our national elections? We really feel proud of ourselves in a presidential election when it draws 50 to 60% of the voters. During some of our elections, even 65 to 75% of the people stay home and don't vote. What an apathy we have. When is enough enough? One night this past week, I heard this startling and discouraging statistic. There have been as many cases of AIDS diagnosed in this country in the past 1 to 1.5 years as there was in the previous 10. This in spite of the many millions that have been and are being spent to fight this terrible illness, more being spent on a disease that could be drastically reduced or even stopped if we could simply get people to behave in a moral and responsible manner. More than on other diseases whose origin or cause still remains a mystery, yet takes the lives of many each year. When is enough enough? What about the statistic revealed recently that 75% of our young people have had sexual relations by the time they finish high school? When is enough enough? While serving on the pulpit committee for this church 4 years ago, we in the pulpit committee learned these startling facts. When you pass someone on the street in the state of Indiana, 4 out of 5 of them are unchurched. 3 out of 5 in the state of Michigan are unchurched. Now, these are not foreign countries. They are part of this great country that has enjoyed for many, many years being called a Christian nation. The border of one is only a little over an hour drive from where we are now sitting and standing. When is enough enough? Some time ago, the Washington Post carried an article saying that 1 in 4 pregnancies abortion. That statistic means abortion is one of the nation's most commonly performed surgical procedures. When is enough? Some authorities tell us that at least 1 in every 4 girls and 1 in every 10 boys by the time they reach the age of 18 has been, his or her 18th birthday, has been sexually abused. When is enough? No. Now we could go on and on today, stating statistics that make each of us ask the same question, when is enough enough? But let's, if we can, attempt to look at this world we live in, the people who live in it, and how those people, you and I and everyone else, are doing from another perspective, God's. Now we can't play God, and we might not realize fully the perspective through which God views, but we can't play dumb either. For we do know enough about God to be able to understand, if we will, what pleases and displeases God. What about God? Is he asking today, when is enough enough? There are many characteristics we use to describe God. Loving, forgiving, patient, caring, just, compassionate, understanding, wisdom, suffering, approachable, concerned, and I'm sure you can think of many others. One of the most identifying of all of these is God's love. And because of this, we presume on his care. A couple of weeks ago in our lesson on temptation, we were reminded not to be presumptuous about God's care. You remember the story from the 4th chapter of Matthew. Satan took Jesus to the highest point in the temple. He suggested that Jesus jump from this highest point, thereby guaranteeing his success with the people by performing such a spectacular stunt. If he would jump, surely the angel sent by God would protect him. Such an event would overwhelm the people and gain their immediate followers. Satan tempted Jesus to presume upon God's care by acting in a reckless manner and then daring God to save him. You and I may know people like this. It could be you or I, couldn't it? What about people who fail to take care of their bodies but expect God to give them good health in latter years? Our Sunday school class liked this example very much. We pray for a safe trip, and then we drive like a maniac to get where we're going. We are not to presume on God's care. Why do we do what we do? What are our motives? Do we seek what sometimes might be spectacular for public acclaim? Or do we seek to find what is God's will and will bring glory to him? What about God's patience? We all agree that God is much more patient with each of us than we are with one another. Much more patient than we are sometimes, even with those that we claim to love. And I might add, much more patient than we are sometimes with God. Can we presume on God's patience? Do we ever exhaust the patience and cause him to ask the question, when is enough enough? Of course we do. In the Old Testament, we have the account of Israel breaking the covenant with God and causing him to say, enough is enough. There's another example I want us to look at in the New Testament. If you will read with me from the 11th chapter of Mark, verses 15 through 17. It says, on reaching Jerusalem, Jesus entered the temple area and began driving out those who were buying and selling there. He overturned the tables of the money changers and the benches of those selling doves, and would not allow anyone to carry merchandise through the temple courts. And as he taught them, he said, Is it not written, my house will be called a house of prayer for all nations, but you have made it a den of robbers. Now all of us are familiar with this story. The temple had become something that was unacceptable in Jesus' eyes. He had said, enough was enough. The practice of selling sacrifices and exchanging money, we know, began as a convenience to the worshipers who traveled great distances in that day. bringing their own sacrificial animals was impractical at that time. However, what was begun as a convenience turned out to be a racket by the money changers and ultimately the high priests who controlled the temple. People were being fleeced at every point. Furthermore, this took place in the court of the Gentiles, creating a carnival type of atmosphere that made it impossible for the Gentiles to worship in the only area of the temple that they were even allowed to go into. What about, no wonder Jesus overturned the tables and drove out of the temple those money changers and those merchandisers. But what about the church today? Do we need cleansing as the temple that day in Jerusalem needed cleansing? We don't have tables of money changers and merchandisers, do we? We don't have a high priest who makes some of those who come to worship feel like second-class citizens and restrict their worship to a certain area of the church, say the basement. Do we? No, we probably don't have those things in our church today. However, if Christ would enter our churches today, I'm convinced he would find tables overturned and areas to cleanse. What about the table of lack of commitment? Most of you, or all of you, know that I am a fan of University of Louisville athletics. I have traveled great distances and sometimes during less than ideal weather conditions to see an athletic event. And they call me a great sports fan. If, however, someone is faithful in his or her attendance of their church services and other activities, they many times are referred to as some religious fanatic. What about the table of lack of concern? We point with pride to our participation in the cooperative program, and we should. Yet we fail sometimes to reach out to those that are in the sounds of our voices and the sight of our eyes. Many of those are waiting for us to reach out to them with their own outstretched hands and their aching hearts. What about the table of disobedience? We pride in being faithful in attendance and generous in giving of both time and money, but we use these to give us excuses to make other decisions based on our will, not God's, thereby rendering us disobedient at times. What about the table of ignorance? We like to hide behind the excuse we don't know, no one told us, or we sometimes say, I forgot, when we really didn't. We use these excuses even though God has and is constantly revealing to us through the scriptures, through prayer, and the witness of others, what he would have us know and to do. If we claim to be uninformed concerning the Word of God, we cannot blame anyone but ourselves. The Bible is there for the reading and the understanding. What about the table of self-satisfaction? We work in the church for several years, and we develop the attitude, I've done my share, I'm tired, I'm getting older, so I'm going to take it easy now, I'm going to let the young ones do it. Have you ever heard that one? What about the table of compromise? Satan and the world around us tells us, yes, our Christian goals are worthy, but our methods are wrong, so compromise those methods. We are influenced to forsake the suffering, the restrictions, the self-discipline for the easy way out, the world's way. After all, this tendency to compromise ideals and methods is widely practiced in the business world, politics, and society in general. In other words, the end justifies the means. And we let these ideas and practices find their way into the church. As you can see, our church today has many tables that need to be overturned. Tables such as pride, jealousy, lack of cooperation, prejudice, and the list will go on and on. Time will not allow us to cover them all. What does this say to us as a church, and perhaps more importantly as individual Christians? Do we need cleansing? What keeps us from being as effective as we can and should be? Someone should ask me this question, what does God want from us? And tell me to answer in one sentence. And I've shared this with my Sunday school class many times. My answer would be, he simply wants to be loved and respected. For if we love and respect him, we will seek to know his will and to do it. In so doing, we will become more obedient. Not perfect, but make a better and more constant effort. We will come to realize the secret to living a more faithful and productive Christian life is allowing Christ to work through us, not attempt to try and work through him. We cannot manipulate and use God. We must be willing to let him use us. God does not need fans. He doesn't need our cheers and applause. He wants and needs our participation. A participation that is dictated by his plan and ideals, not our own. This doesn't mean that he doesn't want us to think for ourselves and use that mind that he's given us. Of course he does. But he wants us to think on a higher level, a level that will allow us, in some degree, to see the wisdom of his decisions, the promises of his ideas, the hope and the potential of his future, and the state of happiness and joy that he wants us always to live in. I remember a story that I heard once. A little 7-year-old boy was walking down the street with his father. And in school, he had been studying addition and subtraction. When he passed a church with a cross on the top, he said, "Look, Dad, a building with a plus sign on the top. Oh, if we could look at our churches today as through the eyes of children and see the plus and never the negative. For you see, the cross is the most positive sign this world has really ever seen. Because Christ took what looked like history's darkest, most negative weekend and turned it into the biggest plus this world will have and has ever experienced. I once saw a statement on the church bulletin board that read, "No matter what your past or present may be,